These are some of the world's biggest cities and tourist destinations. Normally, they would be teeming with millions of people from all over the world, eager to take in the beauty that abounds here. Since the emergence of the COVID-19 coronavirus in December last year, human travel and life as we know it has all but ceased to exist, making the COVID-19 pandemic the biggest single threat to global tourism ever seen since the beginning of records in 1950.
As big game parks, we normally have some shows that we attend with ETA. So for us, the impact, we started feeling it when we had a lot of those shows being cancelled, and that was around February.
We are still receiving almost zero revenue within our facilities because there's no open tourist movements.
Because suddenly this net was coming down around us.
We had some of our tour operators cancelling their trips coming to Eswatini, coming to the parks.
The COVID-19 scenario could be a substantial obstacle.
And that's when I think it started taking to us that this thing is going to affect us.
While the coronavirus is generally seen as a threat to public health, there isn't a single sector of human existence that has been dealt a blow as damaging as that which has been dealt the global tourism industry.
Sibi ngendlela lesimanga sathi kuthi lesifo sibuye phile silesinjengalesi.
Kude ayikho ibhizinisi mntwana lo savalelwa leli gede thina ngilasiphila khona lokuthi sithathelwa ngilabaphumayo.
I-airtime mina bengistoka ya 4,000 ngelanga nangilele nayo ngilale noma kumbe nabo 500 noma 700 nyalo ngiqupha 100 rand lo profita 5 rand.
Solo yaqala le covid mntwana
21 March.
Ngaleyo March leyo nje lokwathiwa nje stop. Umkhuhlane wavela waqala khona lapho nalakisi.
Lockdowns from April up until now, there's a lot of things that have happened in between in terms of the impacts of it in the population and the country at large.
So because of the travel restrictions, the numbers in terms of global tourism have gone down. The impact has been quite huge.
According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, global tourism figures are expected to drop by a whopping 60% throughout 2020. It is said the industry will lose around $1 trillion in revenue inside this year. Such colossal losses to the industry pose a threat to many of the world's sustainable development goals. The industry is interlinked to almost all others. It employs about 10% of the world's gainfully employed and is the single biggest source of revenue for nature conservation initiatives across the planet.
Environmentalists and people who are concerned with the environment in the country, are you seeing the environment itself getting affected by the situation that prevails now with COVID-19?
The truth of the matter is that with the current situation, community tourism is definitely going to be affected, not unless there's an intervention that's going to assist them to keep them afloat. Because we know that the reason why most communities have set aside land for conservation, it's because there is that economic incentive that is aligned to the activity. So the moment you take away the economic activity, it sort of like cripples the whole industry, because now people have got nothing to look up into as a form of return and as a way of making them to appreciate their environment more. Because if you know that you're benefiting as a community, it makes you to appreciate, it makes you to be a custodian of the resource.
These are the Eswatini Tourism Authority head offices. The hopes and fears of the thousands of tourism sector stakeholders in Eswatini are amplified 1,000-fold within these walls. It is mainly the few workers here that are tasked with doing whatever they can to keep the industry breathing as COVID-19 chokes the life out of it.
Annual report tables figures for January to December 2015.
Despite being the biggest disaster the authority has ever had to deal with, at a time where all hands on deck has more meaning than at any time in the history of the ETA, most of its staff are working from home, in line with the COVID-19 regulations, which came into effect when the country effected what was initially supposed to be a 20-day lockdown in March. Though everyone does their best to appear as comical and as polite as possible, it doesn't take long for our cameras to capture emotions at play beyond the customary hospitality.
Economically and health-wise, it's affecting us in every way. But we are trusting God. I actually woke up last 2 weeks back. I woke up and I told myself that this thing's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. We just need to deal with it and we need to face it.
Linda Dlamini is the authority's chief executive officer. She has received a call from a concerned stakeholder moments before our interview with her.
Although government categorized tourism as an essential service, meaning that we are able to continue operating, but because of the numbers that went down, it was impossible for the business owners to continue operating. So that has really affected us negatively. The other thing that has affected tourism is that people in Eswatini understand that non-essential travel is not allowed. So now we have to balance up having tourism as an essential service and then this whole issue of non-essential travel.
Unlike most sectors that began experiencing the full-blown effects of the coronavirus once lockdowns were effected, the tourism industry began taking blows well before this. When it became apparent that COVID-19 was spreading like a wildfire and human travel was found to be the cause, many countries opting to err on the side of caution closed their borders to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19 within their territories.
It hit our shores, the virus hit our shores, and then the governments in the region had to take very serious decisions to protect their people, to protect their livelihoods as well, because this really is a war of protecting economies, lives, and livelihoods, which is really for people to earn a living.
But because these border closures were effected way into the global outbreak of the pandemic, however best they tried, as of the 1st of June 2020, COVID-19 confirmed cases had been reported in all but a dozen countries across the globe. To better understand why this is, we have come to the University of Eswatini, where we speak to Londiwe Hlope, an epidemiology lecturer here.
What normally works, it's before we introduce the cases in country, when we are still having those cases coming from the high-risk countries or places, then it will be effective to say like we are closing the airports, the borders, because we do not want to import these diseases or these cases into our setting, especially a disease like COVID, where we are saying now it is spread from person to person. So it is always effective at the beginning of that outbreak or of that epidemic or towards the end, so that we make sure that we are not reintroducing cases from high-risk countries. But the moment it's within, then that is when now we are talking about these strict lockdowns and all that we are having now.
Okay, so now we are having lockdowns that affect the populace within.
Yes, so in essence, we are trying to limit the spread. So if we are talking about a transmittable disease like COVID-19, we are saying it is spread from one person to another. So we have what we call the R0, which we discussed in our first episode, where we are saying they are factors to consider. So now when we are implementing these lockdowns, we are essentially saying we do not want the spread to continue. So we are trying to limit the reproductivity or the transmission rate of this disease of interest. So that is when now we are going to implement these lockdowns that we've been seeing around.
North Korea, known to do things its own way, didn't take this advice from the World Health Organization.
There is still a lot we don't know. We don't know the source of this virus. We don't understand how easily it spreads. And we don't fully understand its clinical features or severity. China has taken measures it believes appropriate to contain the spread of coronavirus in Wuhan and other cities. WHO does not recommend any broader restrictions on travel or trade.
North Korea was the first country to close its borders on China, and as such, it is among the only 12 countries globally that remain free of COVID-19. Though late, many other countries began effecting some form of travel restrictions. As such, the transport industry, especially the aviation sector, began taking blows. Airports quickly turned into parking bays as countries across the globe shut down all forms of cross-border movement, resulting in gargantuan losses that saw many airlines cease operations. The financial losses experienced within the tourism sector in Eswatini alone are estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of emalangeni.
When this whole thing started, we did a projection. We just wanted to look at the possible loss to business, and so that we can do our planning properly. So when we looked at the numbers, the numbers were sitting at about 206 million loss in revenue between February and July.
These estimates were based on international arrivals dropping by 80%. However, since Eswatini effected its lockdown on March 27, 2020, international arrivals have dropped by an estimated 90 to 96%. Losses factoring this drop are yet to be ascertained.
What we want to do now is to engage on a more robust research. We want to go through and we want to make sure that every establishment gives us information that is quite structured, so that we can come back and say this is really the impact. But obviously we will be working with the Central Statistical Office as well. But our research unit is definitely going to be doing that, not only from just a numbers point of view, but we also do want to have an appreciative understanding of the impact of this to the business owners, to the employees, just so that we are with them and we fully understand, so that whatever measures we put in place and whatever interventions and promotions and campaigns really talk to what is there on the ground.
House on Fire in Malkans is home to one of the country's biggest tourism attractions. Every year, on the last weekend of the month of May, the world convenes here for one of Africa's biggest arts and music festivals, the MTN Bushfire Arts Festival. For 3 days, revelers are treated to music and art forms from the world's best artists. The event is attended by more than 25,000 people throughout the weekend. In its 16-year existence, the event has gone on as scheduled, like clockwork. The year 2020, however, has proven to be a different year.
Suddenly, this net was coming down around us.
The bushfire was among the first casualties in Eswatini of the COVID-19 pandemic. From as early as January, long before the country effected its partial lockdown, many eMaswati and internationals who had already bought tickets tickets to the event were sold out by this time, were already asking themselves how the event could be staged alongside COVID-19.
So I'm trying to recall now, I'm going to go back in time. Things seem to have kind of happened very quickly since then, but we were obviously in the throes of preparing for the MTN Bushfire Festival launch. You know, myself and the team were well aware that this you know, the COVID-19 scenario could be a substantial obstacle to put on the event. Of course, nobody knew at that stage we were talking about postponement. But, you know, I was in touch with a lot of other festival directors to kind of ask, you know, how they were approaching things. And of course, everybody was of the opinion that they would make plans and would set up kind of mitigating regulations, measures to have people in, but to be safe. And, you know, there was this sense that, you know, we could continue. Of course, there's an amazing amount of input, you know, finance, work. It takes a whole year to put on. So the investment and wanting to make sure that you can go ahead is paramount. And I guess we got to a stage where we realized that it couldn't happen, that we had to put people's health and safety first at the expense of bushfire.
We really spent a lot of time just going through possibilities of what could happen. Not having bushfire was a real huge impact for us.
At the beginning of March, after all possible scenarios for hosting the 2020 bushfire had been explored, House on Fire announced the postponement of the much-loved event to the year 2021. The news sent shockwaves across the local tourism sector.
Although the infection rates have been growing quite slowly, the reality is that COVID is here and it is affecting the way we do things, also in the tourism sector. What we realize is that some hotels started closing. If you look at the situation right now and if things will be left as they are, there's going to be a high rate of unemployment and then a high rate of crime. And we don't want this beautiful country of ours, which is renowned for peace and safety, to now turn into something else. So it is quite important for Emaswati to understand that they really need to start loving and supporting their own, and out of really understanding what it means.
At no point in history has the dependency of other sectors on tourism been most evident. The lifeblood of most nature conservation initiatives across the globe is tourism. The drying up of this revenue stream as a result of COVID-19 and travel restrictions imposed by governments across the globe to curb the spread of the pandemic has put a lot of pressure on nature preservation.
So the numbers compared to last year's numbers effective January this year, between January and March, even before we had the lockdown, because you'd recall that our lockdown was effected late in March. But in comparison to what we were getting in terms of tourist numbers to our facilities, it was down by almost half by then.
We can say right now, because we are looking at this, let's just forget about the animals. What's going to happen afterwards? What's going to happen to the next generation when they realize that we were so focused on that we forgot about preserving nature?
The tourism industry for us, basically, in terms of operations, revenue generation, movements, it was at almost 0% in terms of even income generation, which is our main source of revenue in terms of gate collections, the tourist attractions that we have.
Big Game Parks is one of Eswatini's biggest privately owned nature conservation establishments. The company played a pivotal role in the establishment of the country's nature conservation drive more than 100 years ago. The company's marketing manager, Kakama, says the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the biggest threats to nature conservation she has witnessed since she started working for the company.
You feel like it's a dream. You wake up, you come back here and you'll see people just enjoying being here. You'll see people enjoying meeting new people. this thing has gotten to a point that when you meet somebody, you need to question yourself, are they safe? Is it okay? I can't even hug this person I haven't seen in a long time. I can't even shake their hand. It has gotten to that point that you ask yourself, you feel like you need to stay within you, which is something that as a Maswati, it's not for us. A Maswati, we have been known for being so welcoming, being warm. That is something that always draws people to us. And this pandemic has taken that from us.
Kulani has arranged that we go on a game drive to better understand the situation. Having visited Mlilwane a couple of times before, I noticed something weird in the mannerism of the animals kept here. They have seen so few humans in the last couple of months. They graze a lot closer to the roads and aren't frightened by our approach.
labahambako so-ke setivela ti-freely lokho ukuthi tibuyela esikhathini sakadzeni before kuqale tonke letinto tema-game drives netinto tekubukwa nje ti-free njengoba utibona tilele ti-calm and I think if lesimo sichubeka kanje nale behavior yabo itawushintsha because bese batayelela abantu lokubabona malanga onke. But nyalo sekuyenteka nje tibone labo babili bathathu so yeah kutawutishintsha nato kancane kancane.
While eerily sobering, we take advantage of their timid nature and take a few shots of ourselves among them.
So for us as big game parks, we focus on tourism and also on conservation. And tourism, it's one of, we can say it's the major revenue generator for us. It pays for our conservation staff. It pays for us to maintain the animals. So with this COVID thing, it has taken that huge specter of big game parks where the revenue is coming from. So right now, we're looking at, we have this limited number of people that are coming through, but we'll still need to maintain the animals because we are not saying this COVID-19 is not going to end. People are still going to come back and they still need to find these animals, and we still need to pay our guys who are taking care of our animals.
Such is the situation with all nature reserves in the country. The Eswatini National Trust Commission, or ENTC, which runs some of the country's popular nature reserve centers, including Mantenga Cultural Village, Makatsavane and Malolocha, has experienced similar hardship.
Considering that already we are at 0 emalangeni or percent revenue for the past 2 months or so, April, May now, which is 0 in terms of operations, we are severely hammered. Yet the pressure for conservation increases by the day. Poaching incidences have increased. We usually, for the past years, we've been monitoring the trends. Our trends have been showing that the poaching incidents start peaking at around June, July. But this year they started peaking early May. We attributed that to the COVID effects because for the past years it's been consistent that we start having those incidences peaking at around July. So that's another negative factor. The pressure on the teams on the ground in terms of protecting the nature, the wildlife there is increasing. Yet the availability of the resources in terms of capital, in terms of operational budgets, as I've indicated, it's almost 0.
It's inherent with problems of food security, and one of the challenges that were faced by protected areas for a long time, it was the issue of the wildlife and human beings clash, mainly due to people who are trespassing and poaching for different reasons. And you can imagine now with the COVID-19 situation whereby people are complaining about issues of food supply and food security. So we're expecting to see a rise in cases of people who are trespassing to protected areas.
I see tears falling down your face.
Being a major tourism player, the local arts sector has been dealt a damaging blow as well. With the current lockdown in place, where gatherings of more than 20 are prohibited, the local arts industry has all but fizzled into nothingness. Local artists who hardly make anything on record sales have now been reduced to beggars, owing to the fact that they cannot do the one thing that affords them a livelihood: stage events. Local artists are in desperate need of relief assistance. To this end, Jigs and his team are now putting together a digital version of the Bushfire Arts Festival.
Here you are in one of the war rooms. There's various teams working very hard towards getting the digital event out. And these are all little components that need to kind of come together before end of day today, otherwise we're in a lot of trouble.
We've been honoured to host many African legends on the MTN Bushfire stages. Basically what you see me doing right here is I am working on the script for the Keep the Fire Burning digital festival happening this Saturday. And so it's kind of different from how it would be. So originally I'm the MC. I'm one of two MCs for the for the MTN Bushfire Festival. And so it's quite different because it's normally not scripted.
We had to rethink how we can still bring this amazing experience to all the folks at home and around the world. So basically our directors came up with the best idea ever, which is to make it a digital experience.
We spend a lot of time just watching what other festivals were doing, looking at all those performances they were putting up.
And it's been a journey. We've been working for about 3 weeks now, straight, late nights, trying to bring you the best that you would come to experience and the best you would come to expect from MTN Bushfire.
While this will come with very little reward for the bushfire they spent close to a year putting together, it will at least help keep the fires burning and get artists talking about the challenge the planet is blindly trying to traverse.
It's really an opportunity to engage and reconnect, but also to be relevant. So a lot of the content that we're looking at speaks to what's going on and how artists are responding to the situation.
In 2016, MTN Bushfire introduced its Green Your Fire call to action.
From speculative fear that it wouldn't be held to an actual announcement that it would be held next year, the 2020 bushfire went on anyway. Though not the bushfire we hoped for, its being staged online has opened up Jigs and his team to other possible uses of this space going forward. The nature reserves are set to recover. With the lockdown being eased, more than 1 million Emaswati who have been kept under lockdown for months are now eager to explore the natural outdoors. However damaging, the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a few valuable lessons. We have discovered we have been making unnecessary trips on the daily, moving back and forth to and from work. We now know that it is possible for the world's blue-collar employees at least, most of whom make these trips in private cars, to work from home, saving them money and most importantly, reducing their carbon footprint. We have come to understand that ICTs can be used to educate our children in the comfort of their homes, making cost-effective and convenient education something in the not-so-distant future. Perhaps this pandemic is the beginning of a new way of life, a way of life that's in perfect harmony with our one and only home, the planet Earth.